Introduction. Friends, if you want to watch a bold, raw, and emotionally intense movie that captures the wild roller coaster of teenage life like no other, then you've got to check out 13, 2003. This isn't your typical teen drama. Asterisk 13 asterisk dives deep into the messy, chaotic, and sometimes dark reality of adolescence in a way that feels brutally honest and shockingly real. And if you're tuning into our channel for the very first time, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because here, we bring you full breakdowns of the most talked about films, from classics to cult hits, with all the behind-the-scenes juice. In today's video, we're going to take you on a complete ride through the world of 13. We'll talk about what makes this movie so gripping, where and how you can watch it in English, and which streaming platforms or satellite channels are currently showing it. Whether you're watching from home, on a digital rental, or searching for the best place to stream it with maximum impact, we've got all the viewing options covered. But that's just the beginning. We're also going deep into the technical aspects of this film, how it was made, the music that sets the tone, and how the visual style brings the emotional weight of the story to life. We'll look at the pre-production choices, how the film was cast, where it was shot, and how the director Catherine Hardwicke, along with co-writer and star Nikki Reed, brought their vision to the screen. We'll talk about the raw, handheld camera work, the use of natural lighting, and the intimate cinematography that gives the whole film its documentary-like feel. You'll also find out about the budget, which was shockingly low for such a high-impact movie, and how it performed at the box office despite its indie roots. Now let's get into the heart of it. The story. I'll give you a full but spoiler-free overview of what the film is about. 13 follows the life of Tracy, a 13-year-old girl whose journey from innocence to rebellion unfolds in a whirlwind of peer pressure, identity crisis, and desperate attempts to fit in. It's a raw look at how fast things can spiral out of control when boundaries blur and teens are left to figure things out on their own. I'll also share a short review of the storyline, what makes it resonate with audiences even years after its release, and why it sparked so much debate at the time. We'll also break down the star cast. Who's in the film, what roles they played, and how their performances shaped the movie's emotional core. Evan Rachel Wood's portrayal of Tracy is unforgettable, and Nikki Reed, who co-wrote the film at just 13 years old, delivers a performance as Evie that's both captivating and haunting. We'll discuss their chemistry on screen, the intensity of their characters, and how the supporting cast, Holly Hunter, Vanessa Hudgens, and others, contribute to the layered storytelling. And of course, we can't forget the fun stuff, those interesting behind-the-scenes facts that fans love. From real-life inspirations behind the script to how certain scenes were improvised, and even how this film launched careers and became a conversation starter in households, schools, and media around the world. We'll unpack all the trivia and lesser-known details that make this movie a must-watch for any true fan of powerful, emotionally driven cinema. So stay with us till the end because whether you've seen 13 before or you're thinking about watching it for the first time, this video is going to give you all the insights you need to appreciate it on a whole new level. Let's dive right in and explore the unforgettable world of 13. 13 kicks off with a jolt. Tracy and Evie laughing manically, huffing something from a can, slapping each other, completely unhinged. It's a shocker of an opening, the kind that instantly makes you lean in and ask, what happened to these girls? Then the film rewinds, gently pulling us back to the beginning, when Tracy is just your average 7th grader, quiet, studious, sweet, still playing with childhood trinkets and navigating middle school awkwardness. That's where the real ride begins. The movie plays with intensity rather than timeline. It's not non-linear in structure, but it does feel like a descent, fast, sharp, and dizzying. From the moment Tracy locks eyes with Evie Zamora, the school's queen bee of cool, everything changes. Evie is everything Tracy isn't, confident, daring, rebellious, and wrapped in this aura of untouchable freedom. That first encounter, that desire to be noticed and accepted, becomes the film's first major turning point. Tracy decides she's going to become someone new, someone who belongs in Evie's world. What follows is a series of escalating decisions. It starts small, stealing a woman's wallet on Melrose, trying on new clothes, skipping school. But each moment builds. Tracy and Evie become inseparable, almost mirror images of one another, spiraling together into a toxic friendship that blurs the lines between love, obsession, rivalry, and self-destruction. The film uses this dynamic to keep tension constantly simmering. Their bond is electric, but it's also corrosive, and every scene crackles with the sense that something is going to explode. As Tracy pushes deeper into this new identity, piercings, drugs, sex, self-harm, the gap between her and her mother Melanie widens. Melanie, played with raw honesty by Holly Hunter, is loving but overwhelmed, and watching her try to hold on to her daughter is heartbreaking. There are no clear villains here. Just people trying, failing, and trying again. The mother-daughter relationship becomes the emotional backbone of the story, and as Tracy unravels, Melanie's concern grows more desperate. One of the film's most jarring traits is how closely it sticks to Tracy's perspective. The camera often hovers near her face, over her shoulder, tracking her steps like a restless, curious observer. It makes everything feel immediate and claustrophobic. You're not just watching what she does, you're stuck inside the storm with her. When she begins cutting herself, or when her life becomes a blur of blurred nights and brutal mornings, the audience feels every bit of it. That immersion is part of what makes 13 so unforgettable. The emotional peak of the film arrives in quiet devastation rather than explosive drama. Tracy, utterly wrecked from everything, her friendships, her identity, her lies, finally breaks. She crumples in her mother's arms in a wordless moment of raw surrender. It's not a tidy climax, but it's powerful in its simplicity. There's no huge resolution, no clean wrap-up. Instead, there's a sense that this is just one chapter in a long, messy journey. But it's a chapter that leaves scars, for Tracy and for everyone around her. What's unique about the narrative is its refusal to give easy answers. It doesn't manipulate time or use flashy storytelling tricks, but it does dive headfirst into emotional chaos. It builds momentum not through plot twists, but through emotional intensity. Every decision Tracy makes drags her further from who she was, and the film doesn't let you look away as she falls apart and tries to piece herself back together. The structure is conventional, yes, but the storytelling feels anything but typical. It's jagged, intimate, and alive, more like a confession than a story. And that's what gives 13 its lasting impact. The character development in 13 doesn't just unfold, it hits you like a tidal wave. At the center of this emotional storm is Tracy Freeland, a 13-year-old girl who starts off the film like so many of us did at that age. Quiet, eager to fit in, full of dreams, and still clinging to bits of childhood. She's soft-spoken, wears mismatched socks, writes poems in notebooks, and wants to be liked. That innocence, that vulnerability, is what makes her transformation so intense and so heartbreaking to watch. Tracy's character arc is one of the most jarring and authentic in teen cinema. She doesn't just change, she sheds her skin in layers, each one more painful than the last. Her motivation, a desperate hunger to be accepted, to feel alive, to escape the ordinary. She sees Evie and instantly sees a life that looks more exciting, more daring, more adult. The way she mimics Evie's style, language, and attitude isn't just flattery, it's identity theft by desire. But underneath it all, she's still Tracy. That conflict, who she was versus who she's trying to become, drives her entire descent. And the tension between those two versions of herself creates a deep internal war that plays out on her face, in her eyes, in the way she speaks to her mother and shoves away the people who still see her for who she truly is. Evie Zamora, on the other hand, is a character made of contradictions. She's wild, seductive, magnetic, but also manipulative, insecure, and deeply wounded. She's the kind of person who walks into a room and instantly becomes the sun everyone else revolves around, but that charm hides a dark desperation. She clings to Tracy not just because she likes her, but because she needs someone to reflect her back to herself. Evie wants control, but she's also terrified of being abandoned. That fear makes her unpredictable and dangerous, not in a villainous way, but in a very real, very human way. Her layers peel back slowly. Beneath the cool girl swagger is a girl with no stability, no real home, and a knack for using people before they can hurt her first. Then there's Melanie, Tracy's mom, and wow, What a powerhouse of a character. She's the emotional grounding force of the film, even when everything else spins out. She's not perfect. She's struggling. She's trying to hold it together, juggling work, raising kids, dealing with her ex, and figuring out how to stay connected to a daughter who's slipping through her fingers. Her development is subtle but powerful. She goes from being naively optimistic, trusting her daughter too much, to a woman who has to face the brutal truth that love isn't always enough to stop someone from self-destructing. Watching her shift from warmth to panic to firm resolve adds an emotional gravity to the story that sticks with you. The relationships between these characters are where the real magic happens. Tracy and Evie's friendship is intense, obsessive, and coated with all the confusion of early teenage identity. It's not just about best friends, it's about codependency, mirroring, and losing yourself in someone else. Every laugh, every fight, every piercing or drug experiment is a scream for identity. Tracy's dynamic with her mother is just as layered. There's so much love between them, but also frustration, fear, and miscommunication. The way their relationship bends and strains, almost breaking, and then clutches for hope, it's the soul of the film. Even the side characters add richness. Mason, Tracy's older brother, hovers in the background as a reminder of stability and judgment. Brooke, Melanie's boyfriend, adds tension and skepticism. But no one is reduced to just a sidekick or plot device. Everyone has purpose, even in brief appearances, because the film roots itself so deeply in human emotion. Each character's choices, wounds, and coping mechanisms build the messy, beautiful mess that is 13. And the best part? None of them stay the same. They evolve, get shaken, break down, and try to pick themselves back up. It's messy. It's real. It's unforgettable. The performances in 13 are like raw electricity, unfiltered, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. This isn't a movie where actors play characters, it's a movie where they become them. Every performance pulses with real, lived-in emotion, the kind you don't often see in movies, especially not with such young actors front and center. Evan Rachel Wood as Tracy? She doesn't just carry the film, she drags you through it, kicking and screaming. It's one of those performances where you forget you're watching a movie. From the first second she steps on screen, she's Tracy in every cell of her being. You see the shift in her body language, the way her eyes harden over time, how her voice changes as she adopts this new persona. One minute she's wide-eyed and innocent, the next she's screaming, crying, unraveling in a full-blown breakdown, and somehow every note feels absolutely true. There's a scene where she's sobbing in the bathroom, cheeks streaked with mascara and emotion, and it doesn't feel like acting. It feels like a real kid coming apart at the seams. That kind of vulnerability, especially from someone so young, is rare. And she nails it without a single false beat. Then there's Nikki Reed as Evie. Let's just pause for a second and remember that she co-wrote the film and played one of the most complicated teen characters of the 2000s, all at the age of 13. That alone is jaw-dropping. But her performance, it's sly, magnetic, and full of sharp edges. She plays Evie with a mix of confidence and fragility that makes the character impossible to pin down. One moment she's the cool girl with the perfect smirk, the next she's manipulating a grown woman with crocodile tears, and right after that, she's clinging to Tracy like her life depends on it. Nikki brings so much nuance to the role. You see Evie's power, but you also see the cracks underneath. It's a performance that walks a razor's edge, and she never slips. And then there's Holly Hunter as Melanie, Tracy's mom. This is the glue that holds everything together. Hunter brings such warmth and depth to the role. You feel her love, her confusion, her desperation, and her guilt all tangled up in every single line she delivers. She doesn't try to make Melanie perfect. She plays her as a mom who's doing her best, even when her best isn't enough. There's a heartbreaking scene where she tries to confront Tracy, voice trembling, eyes full of tears, and it's like watching someone lose their grip on the person they love most. It's devastating, and it's real. Hunter elevates every scene she's in with emotional precision, like she's holding a live wire and trying not to get burned. Even the supporting cast adds real texture. Brady Corbett as Mason, Tracy's older brother, doesn't have a ton of screen time, but his presence is strong and steady. He's the quiet observer, the one who sees everything unraveling before the adults do. Deborah Unger as Brooke brings a subtle tension to her scenes, especially when things start spiraling out of control and the adults are forced to admit they've been looking the other way. What's so powerful about the acting in 13 is how unpolished it is. And that's not a criticism, it's exactly what makes the film work. These performances feel lived in, not rehearsed. They aren't glossy or theatrical. They're messy, emotional, and completely human. There's shouting, sobbing, long silences that feel too real, moments where no one knows what to say, and it all adds to the authenticity. The chemistry between the cast, especially between Evan Rachel Wood and Nikki Reed, is magnetic. You believe in their friendship, their love, their chaos. You believe in the friction between Tracy and her mom. You believe in every awkward, painful, beautiful moment. That's what makes these performances stand out. They don't just tell the story. They bleed it. Catherine Hardwicke doesn't just direct 13, she injects it with adrenaline, emotion, and raw nerve. This isn't a film that quietly guides you along. It grabs you by the collar and throws you into the chaos of teenage life with no warning and no padding. From the very first frame, you know you're not watching a polished teen drama. You're watching something jagged and alive, and that's entirely thanks to Hardwicke's fearless direction. She builds the tone of the film like a storm rolling in, sunlight and giggles at first, then darkness creeping in through the edges, until you're fully engulfed in the emotional downpour. The mood never stays in one place for long. One scene feels like a sugar rush, full of music, neon colors, and rebellious freedom. The next is heavy, quiet, intimate, drenched in dread or desperation. This mood shifting isn't accidental. Hardwicke is using tone like a weapon, slicing through the audience's comfort zone and pulling them right into Tracy's mental and emotional free fall. Visually, she goes full guerrilla. The camera is handheld, gritty, always on the move. There's a sense that the camera itself is trying to keep up with these characters as they spiral out of control. It gets close, really close, into faces, into cramped spaces, into the thick of arguments and breakdowns. It's not about perfectly framed shots. It's about capturing the emotion as it happens, as it erupts. That lack of polish makes it feel almost documentary-like you're watching real life play out in front of you, not something scripted or rehearsed. Color plays a sneaky but important role in her vision too. In the early scenes, the colors are warm and soft, mirroring Tracy's innocence. But as the story progresses and her descent begins, the palette shifts. Harsher lighting, colder tones, more shadows creeping in. It's like the film is losing its innocence right along with her, and you don't even realize it until you're knee-deep in the transformation. That visual evolution tracks perfectly with Tracy's emotional journey. Pacing is another tool Hardwicke wields with precision. The film doesn't waste time. It's quick, breathless, sometimes deliberately disorienting. The cuts are fast when emotions are high, slow when the weight of the moment needs space to sink in. It creates this push-pull feeling where the audience never gets too comfortable. You're constantly being dragged forward, just like Tracy, tumbling from one decision to the next with barely a chance to breathe. But it's the emotional honesty Hardwicke brings to the storytelling that seals the deal. This isn't a film made from the outside looking in. It feels like it was created from inside the mind of a teenage girl. Her fears, her fury, her confusion, her craving for approval, her need to feel something, anything. There's no judgment in the way Hardwicke presents Tracy's journey. There's empathy, there's urgency, and there's pain, but no finger-pointing. That alone makes the story feel more real than any after-school special style drama could ever manage. And then there's the fact that she developed the script alongside Nikki Reed, who was living a version of this story in real time. That collaboration bleeds through every scene. It's not just a film about teenagers. It feels like it was made by teenagers, with all their volatility, intensity, and aching vulnerability fully intact. Hardwicke's direction is what gives 13 its teeth. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't soften the edges. She gives you the truth, and it stings, in the best way possible. The cinematography in 13 doesn't just capture the story, it lives it. Elliot Davis, the film's director of photography, doesn't go for sleek or polished visuals. Instead, he crafts a raw, restless style that mirrors Tracy's emotional chaos. The camera feels like a teenager itself, curious, impulsive, constantly shifting, never quite sitting still. It chases emotions more than it frames perfection, and that choice gives the entire film an immersive, almost feverish energy. From the very beginning, the cinematography sets the tone with handheld shots that feel close and personal, sometimes even claustrophobic. The camera stays tight on faces, getting right into the middle of conversations, fights, breakdowns. There's very little breathing room, and that's entirely the point. You're not watching Tracy's life from a distance. You're right there with her, trapped in the intensity, pulled into the rush of her every high and low. That closeness becomes even more jarring when things spiral. The more chaotic Tracy's life gets, the more erratic the camera becomes. Shaky, jumpy, shifting focus mid-shot, as if it can't keep up with the unraveling. It's not clean. It's not slick. But it's alive, and that makes all the difference. Lighting plays a huge role in how the story is told visually. In the early scenes, before Tracy's transformation begins, everything is lit with a soft glow. There's warmth in the sunlight pouring into her bedroom, comfort in the late afternoon shadows at home, a sense of safety in how things look. But as Tracy steps into Evie's world, that warmth fades fast. The lighting gets harsher, colder, more artificial. Suddenly, rooms are bathed in icy blues and yellows that make everything feel tense and uncomfortable. The nighttime scenes especially, lit by streetlights, neon signs, or the flicker of a lighter, feel dangerous and unpredictable. The lighting is telling its own story, a slow visual decay that reflects how Tracy's world is changing under her feet. Framing is another brilliant tool used to communicate emotion. Characters are often framed off-center, or partially cut out of the shot, creating a feeling of imbalance. Sometimes we see Tracy through mirrors, through door frames, through barriers, visual metaphors for her fractured identity and growing distance from her old life. The film frequently uses tight framing that leaves little space around characters, making every scene feel suffocating. You feel the pressure building, the weight pressing down on her, with nowhere to escape. And when the film does finally pull back, for example, when Tracy breaks down in the park, or curls up in her mother's arms, those wide shots feel like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. There are also visually striking moments that hit hard. The quick-cut montage of Tracy and Evie trying on clothes, taking selfies, piercing each other's bellies. It's chaotic, jumpy, and drenched in color. It's pure teen energy, wild and uninhibited. Then there's the slow-motion shot of Tracy spinning in the park, arms out, hair flying, momentarily free from everything, until reality crashes back in. And who could forget the scenes where Tracy stares blankly in the mirror, smeared eyeliner under her eyes, completely detached from who she used to be. The cinematography in those moments doesn't just reflect her breakdown, it magnifies it. Atmosphere is everything in this film, and the cinematography never lets it slip. It builds tension in the quiet spaces, beauty in the chaos, and discomfort in the places where things should feel safe. Bedrooms become battlegrounds. Living rooms become interrogation zones. The camera finds the cracks in these familiar spaces and widens them until you can feel the unease. It never shouts. It whispers. It shakes when Tracy shakes. It calms when she calms. It sees the world through her eyes, but it never lets you look away. In 13, the cinematography isn't just background. It's part of the emotion, the rhythm, the breakdown. It breathes with the story. It's intimate, imperfect, and brutally real. And that's exactly what makes it unforgettable. The editing in 13 feels like it was built on adrenaline, instinct, and a pulse that just won't quit. It's fast, it's jarring, it's moody, and it matches Tracy's emotional journey almost beat for beat. The rhythm of the film doesn't try to soothe you. It tries to keep you on edge. And it succeeds. Right from the start, the film doesn't waste time easing you in. You're immediately thrown into a chaotic moment between Tracy and Evie, and then you're yanked backward to the more innocent beginning. That opening flash-forward sets the tone for the editing style: sharp cuts, emotional whiplash, and a sense that time is bending around Tracy's psychological state. Transitions aren't about elegance, they're about emotion. Scenes don't always flow smoothly from one to the next, but they don't need to. This is a film about turbulence, about adolescence slamming into identity and imploding. So the editing leans into that. There are abrupt jumps, quick cuts, hard shifts from light to dark, from loud to silent. It's purposeful disorientation. You're never quite allowed to settle. Just when a moment threatens to slow down, another scene kicks in like a jolt to the system. New outfit, new crisis, new betrayal, new lie. The momentum is relentless. And that's the point. Tracy's life isn't calm or cohesive. It's a storm of sensations, decisions, and consequences, and the editing mirrors that. But there are also moments when the pace slows, and those slowdowns hit even harder because of what came before. A quiet dinner scene after a montage of rebellion feels tense, like a fragile truce. A close-up of Tracy lying on her bed, barely blinking, feels endless in contrast to the speed of everything else. These slower beats give the story breathing room, and they make the emotional pain more pronounced. It's like the film knows exactly when to hit the brakes, just long enough for the audience to catch their breath, and then it floors it again. One of the most effective editing choices comes during the montage sequences. The energy is frantic. Images flash by in bursts: shoplifting, makeup smears, piercings, kisses, tears, parties, shouting, all crashing into one another like a memory overload. It creates this whirlwind effect that perfectly captures how fast Tracy's world is spinning. And then, right when it all feels too much, the film will slam into silence, or a still frame, or a long stare that forces you to sit in the aftermath. That contrast is powerful. It's what gives the film its emotional punch. The pacing doesn't follow a traditional arc, and that's what makes it work. There's no tidy build-up to a single dramatic climax. Instead, it's waves of tension that rise and crash over and over again. One minute Tracy's laughing with Evie in the mirror, the next she's screaming at her mother or collapsing into sobs in the bathroom. The editing rides those emotional waves without trying to smooth them out. You feel the mess. You feel the exhaustion. You feel like you're in the chaos with her. Even the use of sound in the edit plays into this. Music crashes in and fades out fast. Dialogue overlaps. Scenes bleed into each other in a way that keeps your brain buzzing. It's not about clarity. It's about capturing the messy, hyper-emotional headspace of being 13 and completely lost. There are no wasted scenes. Every shot feels like it's pushing the story forward or digging deeper into Tracy's emotional state. What makes the editing in 13 so impactful is that it never feels like it's trying to impress you. It feels like it's trying to be Tracy, wild, fragmented, impulsive, vulnerable, and aching for something real. The rhythm of the film isn't smooth, it's alive. And it makes sure you stay hooked, rattled, and completely absorbed until the very last frame. The soundtrack and score in 13 work like an emotional GPS. They don't just accompany the scenes, they guide you through them, pulling you deeper into Tracy's headspace with every beat, thump, and silence. The music in this film doesn't exist in the background like wallpaper. It pulses, it vibrates, it crashes in at just the right moments to reflect the whirlwind that is adolescence. It's carefully curated chaos, and it fits the tone like a glove with the fingers ripped off. Instead of leaning on a traditional score heavy with orchestration, the film blends a gritty, alternative, and sometimes industrial mix of songs that match the rawness of Tracy's world. You get tracks that sound like they've been ripped straight off a burned CD from a teenage bedroom drawer, grungy, moody, rebellious, and loaded with attitude. These aren't just random mood pieces. They are the mood. Every time a new song kicks in, it sets the tone for the scene, whether it's the thrill of sneaking out, the dizzy energy of a shopping spree, or the emotional fallout of another argument. One standout element is how the music captures the high of Tracy's new life. Early on, when she's first getting sucked into Evie's orbit, the soundtrack hits you with this rush of sound. Fast beats, slick bass lines, distorted guitars. The music reflects the excitement, the danger, the adrenaline of rebellion. It doesn't tell you how to feel. It throws you into the feeling. And then, just when you're riding the high, the music drops out, or shifts completely. The silence creeps in. And it's in those quiet, echoing moments where the real emotional impact hits. Silence is used masterfully in 13. It's not just the absence of sound, it's the presence of weight. There are scenes where everything slows, and the music fades completely, leaving just the awkward breath, the broken sob, the rustle of a blanket. Those moments are deafening in their quiet. They let the performances breathe. They let the pain hang in the air without softening it. You feel every second. The film knows when to scream and when to whisper, and it uses that contrast to full effect. Recurring sonic motifs aren't built around one central theme, but rather the vibe. There's a pattern in how music is used during Tracy's emotional peaks. When she's fully in the moment, music dominates. When she's shattered or lost, it disappears, like even the soundtrack doesn't know what to say. That rhythm creates a natural ebb and flow in the film's emotional current. You almost start to anticipate the drop, not just in sound, but in Tracy's spirit. And here's the genius. The music never overpowers the story. It melds with it. Whether it's a track blasting while Tracy and Evie strut through the streets like rebels without a plan, or a quiet acoustic piece underscoring a moment of self-harm, the sound is always an extension of Tracy's experience. It doesn't tell you what to feel. It lets you feel what she's feeling. It lives in her world. Even the music choices feel like they belong to the characters. Nothing feels too polished or cinematic. It sounds like what teenagers would actually listen to. And that makes the whole thing more immersive, more honest, more painful. The score, when it appears, is subtle, ambient, atmospheric, never pulling attention. It blends seamlessly into the emotional texture of the scene. You don't notice it unless you're listening for it, and that's exactly the point. It's not about creating a mood from the outside. It's about amplifying the one that's already burning inside the characters. In 13, music isn't a background track. It's a heartbeat. It speeds up when the emotions surge, slows down when the world crashes in, and sometimes flatlines entirely when things get too heavy to bear. Whether it's a screaming guitar riff or a moment of pure silence, the soundtrack is always doing something important. It's not there to entertain. It's there to feel. 13 isn't just a story about one girl's wild ride through adolescence. It's a gritty microscope held up to some of the rawest, most complicated themes about growing up, identity, and the fragile line between rebellion and self-destruction. The film dives headfirst into questions that aren't always comfortable to ask but are impossible to ignore once you start thinking about them. One of the biggest themes swirling through the film is the search for identity in a world that's confusing, unforgiving, and fast-moving. Tracy's desperate transformation isn't just about copying Evie's style or acting out. It's about figuring out who she is when everything she thought she knew about herself starts to slip away. The film captures that jittery, sometimes terrifying feeling of adolescence where the rules are unclear and peer approval feels like survival. It's a theme that hits hard because it's universal, but 13 doesn't sugarcoat it. It shows that searching for yourself can lead to dangerous places if you're not careful, and sometimes the people you think will save you might just pull you down deeper. Then there's the brutal honesty about peer pressure and the impact it has on young lives. The film doesn't shy away from showing how quickly things can escalate, how a few choices can spiral into serious consequences. It explores how friends can be both a lifeline and a trap, how wanting to belong can push you into situations that chip away at your sense of self until you're barely recognizable. The relationship between Tracy and Evie isn't just a friendship, it's a battleground for power, identity, and control. This dynamic captures the complexity of teenage relationships perfectly, showing both the thrill and the toxicity that can come with them. Family dynamics are another huge theme that 13 tackles head-on. Melanie and Tracy's relationship is full of love, but it's also tangled with misunderstanding, frustration, and the challenge of communication. The film digs into how parents and kids often speak different languages when it comes to emotions and expectations, especially during those turbulent teenage years. Melanie's struggle to reach her daughter and Tracy's push to break free from her mother's grasp highlight how painful and complicated family love can be. It's a messy, imperfect dance that feels incredibly real and relatable. The film also touches on self-harm and the ways pain can manifest physically when it becomes too much to handle emotionally. Tracy's turning to cutting isn't presented as a shocking plot device, but as a heartbreaking symptom of her internal turmoil. It's raw and unflinching, and it forces viewers to confront the often hidden struggles that many teens face. This theme isn't easy to watch, but it's handled with care and respect, adding to the film's emotional depth. Another undercurrent throughout the movie is the exploration of control, or the lack of it. Tracy's life starts spinning out because she's grasping for control in a world where so much feels out of reach. Whether it's controlling her image, her friends, or even her own pain, there's a desperate need to feel something solid amidst the chaos. The film's portrayal of this need resonates because it's something anyone who's ever felt lost can relate to, no matter their age. What's remarkable about 13 is that none of these themes feel forced or heavy-handed. The film doesn't sit you down for a lecture or spell things out with big dramatic speeches. Instead, it lets the story and characters embody these ideas naturally. You don't just hear about peer pressure, you feel it in every whispered dare, every stolen moment. You don't just understand family tension, you see it crack and splinter in every strained glance and shouted argument. And because these themes are woven so deeply into the characters' lives and choices, they linger long after the credits roll. You start thinking about your own experiences, about how we all carry these struggles in some form. The film leaves you with questions rather than answers, which makes the experience feel less like watching a movie and more like stepping into a conversation you didn't know you needed to have. In the end, 13 is a film about the messy, painful, thrilling chaos of growing up. It tackles some pretty heavy stuff: identity, friendship, family, pain, control, but does so with honesty and heart. It doesn't offer neat solutions, but it opens the door to understanding, empathy, and maybe a little hope. In 13, visual effects and CGI take a back seat, almost to the point where you might forget they're even there. This is a film that's all about raw, real, and unfiltered moments, and the filmmakers wisely keep the effects minimal, relying heavily on practical, in-the-moment filmmaking to pull you into Tracy's chaotic world. There's no flashy CGI or overt digital wizardry trying to dazzle or distract. Instead, any effects work is subtle and designed purely to serve the story's emotional authenticity. When it comes to visual effects, the film style leans toward naturalism, which means the practical effects, like makeup, lighting tricks, or physical set details, are the stars of the show. For example, the bruises, cuts, and self-harm scars on Tracy aren't over the top or exaggerated. They're painfully realistic, showing the consequences of her actions in a way that feels very immediate and human. These practical effects ground the story in a gritty reality that CGI could never replicate with the same impact. Occasionally, the film uses quick visual flourishes, like flashes, blurs, or distorted shots, to reflect Tracy's emotional state. These effects aren't digital overlays or big-budget CGI explosions. They're small, experimental touches added in post-production that enhance the feeling of disorientation and turmoil without pulling the viewer out of the moment. They blend seamlessly with the handheld camera work and rough aesthetic, feeling like natural extensions of the story rather than interruptions. The restrained approach to effects keeps the focus where it belongs, on the performances, the relationships, and the emotional core of the film. When there's no digital gloss to hide behind, every glance, every tear, every movement carries more weight. This rawness helps the audience connect more deeply with the characters' struggles because what you see feels immediate and honest, not constructed or artificial. In scenes where the chaos of Tracy's world ramps up, shopping sprees, parties, arguments, there's an energy and vibrancy created by practical staging and natural lighting, rather than effects. This creates a sense of immersion that digital effects might have dulled. The gritty textures of the sets, the unpolished costumes, and the imperfect, shaky camera work all work together to build a world that feels lived in and real. So while 13 doesn't rely on visual effects to tell its story, the few moments where subtle enhancements appear are carefully crafted to deepen immersion and reflect Tracy's inner turmoil. They're like little whispers in the visual language of the film, barely noticeable unless you pay close attention, and that's exactly why they work so well. They never distract. They only draw you further into the messy, raw, and powerful experience that 13 delivers. The set design and locations in 13 don't just provide a backdrop, they breathe life into Tracy's world, turning everyday spaces into stages for a coming-of-age drama that feels raw, real, and painfully relatable. This isn't a glossy teen movie with perfect bedrooms or Instagram-ready hangouts. Instead, the production design leans heavily into gritty authenticity, creating environments that look lived in, messy, and a little on the edge, just like the characters themselves. Starting with Tracy's home, the set feels like an honest snapshot of a middle-class family trying to hold things together. The rooms are cluttered with signs of a real life in motion: school books tossed on the couch, dishes left in the sink, clothes scattered on the floor. Melanie's house isn't a sanctuary, it's a battleground of emotions, a place where love and frustration coexist. The way the production design captures this tension is subtle but effective. It's not overly stylized or staged, which makes the emotional moments between mother and daughter hit that much harder. The house almost feels like a character itself, sometimes comforting, sometimes confining, always real. School settings and hangouts are equally well realized. The classrooms, hallways, and cafeterias have that unmistakable blend of boredom and chaos that only middle school can deliver. Lockers tagged with graffiti, peeling paint, and the echo of teenage voices all contribute to a sense of place that grounds the story in a recognizable reality. The film avoids the sanitized, almost clinical school settings seen in other teen movies, opting instead for spaces that feel crowded, noisy, and a little grimy, the perfect reflection of adolescent life's messiness. The locations Tracy and Evie frequent outside school add crucial texture to the narrative. The shopping trips to Melrose Avenue, with its mix of thrift stores and edgy boutiques, become a playground of rebellion and identity exploration. These spots are bursting with color, attitude, and energy, visually emphasizing Tracy's desperate attempt to fit into a world that feels thrilling but dangerous. The contrast between these vibrant urban spaces and Tracy's more subdued home life underscores the growing divide in her world. Even the more intimate settings, bedrooms, bathrooms, backyards, are packed with emotional weight. These are the places where Tracy's private battles play out, where she's most vulnerable. The sets don't try to be pretty, they embrace imperfection. Cracked mirrors, messy desks, harsh fluorescent lighting in bathrooms, all these details make the viewer feel like a fly on the wall, witnessing moments that are too real and too raw to stage perfectly. Props also play an essential role in reinforcing the story's authenticity. From the cheap jewelry and piercing guns to the stolen wallets and scribbled notes, every item feels like it belongs in the hands of a teenager grappling with identity and rebellion. The use of everyday objects grounds the story, making Tracy's world tactile and believable. The production design's commitment to realism doesn't just support the story, it enhances it. It creates a visual language that speaks to the chaos, the confusion, and the emotional intensity of growing up in a world that doesn't always make sense. The locations are more than just places, they're emotional landscapes that echo the characters' inner turmoil and hopes. What's truly impressive is how the film balances these rough edges with moments of beauty, like the golden light spilling into a room during a rare quiet moment, or the colorful chaos of a party scene that feels like a snapshot of teenage freedom and desperation all at once. These contrasts make the environments feel dynamic and alive, never static or one-note. In 13, set design and locations are a crucial part of storytelling. They build a world that feels authentic and emotionally charged, making every scene more immersive and every character's journey more believable. You don't just see where Tracy lives and plays, you feel it. The dialogue and script in 13 hit with a kind of authenticity that makes you forget you're watching actors and instead feel like you're eavesdropping on real teenagers navigating a world that's confusing, thrilling, and often downright brutal. The writing doesn't try to dazzle with fancy turns of phrase or flowery monologues. Instead, it captures the raw, fragmented, and sometimes awkward way teenagers really speak. It's messy, it's unfiltered, and it's totally compelling. What stands out immediately is how natural the conversations feel. Whether it's a whispered secret between Tracy and Evie, a tense showdown with Tracy's mom, or a casual hallway exchange, the dialogue sounds lived in and spontaneous. The characters talk over each other, pause awkwardly, interrupt, and slip between slang and vulnerability in ways that feel completely true to life. You get the sense that the writers weren't trying to polish these scenes but wanted to keep the rough edges intact, because that's where the real emotion lives. There's a sharpness to some of the exchanges that cuts through the tension. For example, the way Evie manipulates or challenges Tracy isn't just through big dramatic statements but through sly, biting remarks that sting with teenage cruelty and insecurity. It's those little verbal jabs, the undercurrents of power and jealousy, that elevate the dialogue beyond just teen chatter. You feel the complexity beneath the words: friendship, rivalry, admiration, and fear all tangled up in a few sharp sentences. At the same time, the script doesn't shy away from emotional weight. There are moments where the dialogue is stripped down to its barest, simplest form. I'm scared. Why are you doing this? And those moments hit like a punch to the gut. The quiet, honest admissions feel rare and precious amid the noise of rebellion and chaos. The script respects those moments, giving them room to breathe and letting the actors pour them full of meaning. One of the best things about the writing is how it balances teenage slang and rebellion with genuine vulnerability. Lines that might initially seem like typical teen bravado often reveal deeper layers when you pay attention. For instance, the way Tracy tries to sound tough or confident often comes with a tremor of uncertainty beneath the surface. The script doesn't just hand out cool lines, it hands out lines that reveal character and emotion in equal measure. Memorable lines in 13 don't come wrapped in quotable one-liners. Instead, they sneak up on you, offhand comments, sarcastic retorts, or moments of brutal honesty that linger long after you hear them. Like when Tracy mutters something biting under her breath, or when Melanie's frustration boils over in a moment of heartbreak. Those lines stay with you because they feel earned and real, not scripted. The writing also does a fantastic job of using silence and subtext. Sometimes what's not said carries more weight than what is. Pauses, unfinished sentences, and looks exchanged in place of words create a rich tapestry of meaning that pulls the viewer deeper into the emotional complexity of the story. It's this mix of spoken and unspoken communication that makes the script feel layered and alive. Overall, the dialogue and script in 13 are like a perfectly cracked mirror reflecting the chaos and beauty of adolescence. It's messy, sharp, tender, and unforgettable, just like being 13. 13 plays with the coming-of-age drama genre like a daredevil flipping expectations upside down, rather than following the usual well-trodden path. It doesn't settle for the safe, glossy teen movie cliches, the ones filled with neat resolutions, clear moral lessons, or exaggerated caricatures of teenage life. Instead, it plunges into the messy, uncomfortable, and unpredictable reality of adolescence with a fearless honesty that's rare and refreshing. Rather than the typical awkward but endearing teen finds themselves storyline, 13 throws you into the whirlwind of teenage rebellion, peer pressure, and identity crises with a rawness that borders on unsettling. It sidesteps the sanitized Hollywood version of youth and opts for a gritty, unpolished look at what it really feels like to be 13 and teetering on the edge. That's where it starts to subvert expectations. The film refuses to give you easy answers or neat character arcs. There's no triumphant moment where everything clicks into place, no tidy happy ending where lessons are learned and futures are bright. Instead, it's a slice of life that's chaotic, painful, and all too real. In terms of genre conventions, the movie borrows elements of teen drama, the friendship dynamics, family struggles, the pull of peer groups, but it injects these familiar beats with a level of psychological depth and emotional intensity that feels fresh. The friendship between Tracy and Evie isn't just cute or funny, it's a complicated tangle of influence, manipulation, and vulnerability. The film digs into the darker side of adolescent bonding that many other movies shy away from, like how toxic friendships can become and how they shape identity in sometimes destructive ways. Where 13 really breaks new ground is in its visual and narrative style within the genre. The handheld camera work, the jagged editing, the naturalistic dialogue, all these stylistic choices amplify the drama in a way that feels immediate and immersive, rather than distant or staged. It's almost like a docudrama in places, blurring the lines between fiction and reality. That sense of realism pulls you deeper into the emotional stakes, making the drama hit harder and feel more personal. There's a subtle but powerful absence of humor too, or at least of the kind of light-hearted moments that teen dramas often use to balance heavy themes. 13 is unapologetically intense, keeping the tension simmering rather than letting it evaporate. The film isn't about easy entertainment, it's about confrontation with uncomfortable truths. That might not make it a crowd pleaser in the traditional sense, but it certainly elevates it above formulaic genre fare. While the film doesn't include action or suspense in the traditional sense, it builds a different kind of tension, emotional suspense. You're on edge not because of car chases or cliffhangers, but because of the unpredictability of the characters' choices and the escalating consequences. That tension is more subtle but no less gripping. It's the suspense of watching someone spiral and wondering just how far they'll fall. 13 also flips the script on family drama clichés. Melanie isn't the perfect understanding mom, nor is she the cold villain. She's messy, flawed, and deeply human, which makes the family conflict feel real rather than staged. This complexity in relationships adds layers to the genre, enriching the emotional landscape beyond typical black-and-white portrayals. So rather than leaning on tired tropes or predictable arcs, 13 uses its genre as a launching pad to explore the darker Messier side of growing up. It balances drama with psychological realism and emotional depth, creating a film that feels fresh, raw, and uncomfortably close to the truth. It's a teen movie, yes, but one that rewires the genre's expectations and delivers a story that stays with you long after the credits roll. 13 sneaks up on you as much more than a teenage coming-of-age story. It's a sharp, unflinching commentary on the social and cultural pressures that shape young lives, especially in the early 2000s, but with themes that still echo loudly today. The film doesn't wear a political banner or lecture the audience, but its portrayal of adolescence is packed with subtle observations about identity, class, family dynamics, and the often invisible struggles teenagers face in society's shadows. At its core, 13 highlights the crushing weight of social expectations and peer pressure on young girls. Tracy's desperate need to fit in, to be cool, and to escape her home life isn't just a personal crisis. It's a reflection of how cultural norms and societal messages push teenagers towards self-destructive behaviors in the name of belonging. The film doesn't sugarcoat the cost of this pressure. Instead, it pulls back the curtain on the dark side of teenage culture, the manipulation, the rebellion, the risky behaviors, showing how these are sometimes coping mechanisms for deeper emotional neglect or confusion. The family dynamics in 13 also serve as a microcosm for larger social issues. Melanie's struggle as a single mother balancing work, care, and discipline speaks to economic and gender pressures many families face. There's no idealized version of motherhood here, just a woman doing her best in a difficult situation, often overwhelmed and disconnected from her daughter's internal battles. This nuanced portrayal challenges simplistic ideas about parenting, highlighting how systemic factors, like economic stress or social isolation, can influence family relationships and impact youth behavior. Another cultural layer is the depiction of gender roles and expectations. The film explores how Tracy's transformation is tied to her discovery of sexuality, power, and appearance, all heavily influenced by cultural images of what it means to be a cool teenage girl. But this exploration isn't glamorized. Instead, it exposes how these societal messages can warp self-image and push young girls into risky decisions in pursuit of approval and control. The pressure to conform to a certain look or attitude becomes a form of social currency, and 13 shows how dangerous and fragile that currency can be. Importantly, the film's approach to sensitive topics like self-harm is handled with a raw honesty that doesn't feel exploitative or sensationalized. Tracy's cutting isn't a plot device, it's a cry for help, a physical manifestation of her emotional pain. The film invites the audience to understand rather than judge, which is a powerful cultural statement in itself, especially in a time when such topics were rarely discussed openly on screen. Social class also quietly but effectively weaves through the narrative. The tension between Tracy's modest home life and the seemingly glamorous but toxic world she steps into highlights the class divides and aspirations many teens grapple with. It's a subtle but important backdrop that adds realism and depth without turning into a heavy-handed social critique. What makes 13's commentary stand out is how seamlessly these issues are woven into the fabric of the story. They don't feel tacked on or preachy. Instead, they emerge naturally from the characters' lives and choices. This grounded approach makes the film's observations feel lived in and authentic rather than forced or agenda-driven. By focusing on the intimate and personal rather than broad strokes, 13 invites viewers to reflect on the cultural forces shaping youth without pointing fingers or offering easy answers. It's a mirror held up to society's influence on identity, belonging, and pain, an invitation to see the often invisible struggles teenagers face beneath the surface. In this way, 13 becomes more than just a film about a troubled teen. It's a cultural snapshot, a social commentary, and a reminder that behind every teenage rebellion is a complex web of societal pressures, family dynamics, and the universal search for self. It captures the messy reality of growing up in a world that isn't always kind or forgiving, making its message both timeless and deeply relevant. 13 doesn't just ask for your attention, it grabs you by the collar and drags you into a whirlwind of emotions that are as intense as they are unpredictable. Watching this film is less like sitting back and observing and more like riding shotgun through a roller coaster of teenage chaos, where every twist and turn jolts you out of complacency and forces you to feel alongside Tracy. It's an emotional tug-of-war that pulls laughter, tears, shock, and uneasy silence from the audience, often all in the same scene. Right from the opening scenes, the film hooks you with its unapologetic honesty. There's a kind of nervous energy bubbling under every interaction that makes you lean in closer, almost holding your breath, waiting for the next emotional explosion. And 13 delivers those moments in spades. You find yourself laughing at the awkward, painfully relatable moments of early adolescence, like the desperate attempts to fit in or the clumsy experiments with rebellion, because, let's face it, those moments hit close to home for anyone who's ever been 13. But just as quickly, that laughter is undercut by a gut punch, a harsh argument, a betrayal, or a glimpse of Tracy's raw pain that flips the mood and keeps you off balance. The film excels at layering these emotional beats so that they don't feel isolated but build on each other, creating a deepening connection to the characters. When Tracy is having a moment of joy or freedom, you feel almost elated with her, caught up in the thrill of discovery and friendship. But when things spiral and the consequences hit hard, the film doesn't let you look away. Instead, it draws you in closer, making the heartbreak and confusion feel immediate and real. That emotional intimacy is rare in teen dramas and is a huge part of why 13 sticks with you. Some scenes linger in your mind long after the screen goes dark. Moments like Tracy's breakdowns, the tense confrontations with her mother, or the unsettling dynamics between friends hit with a shock of authenticity that's impossible to ignore. These scenes don't just tell you how to feel, they make you feel. They invite empathy without sugarcoating or sentimentality, which can be uncomfortable but also deeply rewarding. The emotional resonance of 13 is also why it sparks conversation. It's the kind of film that invites you to unpack what you just saw, to debate the characters' choices, and to reflect on your own teenage years or those of people you know. Its raw portrayal of friendship, family, and identity isn't just entertainment, it's a conversation starter. People come away wanting to talk about the messy realities it exposes, the moments that hit too close to home, and the uncomfortable truths it refuses to gloss over. That level of engagement also encourages repeat viewings. There's so much packed into the performances, the dialogue, and the visuals that watching 13 again reveals new layers each time. You notice the subtle glances, the background details, the pacing choices that you might have missed on first watch because you were so caught up in the emotional whirlwind. It's a film that rewards attention and reflection, turning what might seem like a straightforward teen drama into a complex emotional experience. Even for viewers who aren't teenagers, the emotional core of 13 transcends age. The film taps into universal feelings, alienation, the desire to belong, the struggle for control, that resonate on a human level. That's why it can provoke laughter, shock, or tears from all kinds of audiences. It's not just a film about being 13. It's a film about being human, messy, vulnerable, and searching. In the end, 13 doesn't just engage its audience, it pulls them into the story and makes them live it. The emotional highs and lows aren't just on screen, they ripple outward, touching something inside every viewer and making the film linger in memory long after the credits roll. 13 occupies a unique spot in the crowded landscape of teen dramas, standing apart from many of its genre cousins by diving deeper and darker into the chaotic reality of adolescence without the usual filters or fairy tale gloss. While movies about coming of age are a dime a dozen, 13 manages to carve its own path by rejecting the sanitized versions of teenage life and instead embracing the raw, uncomfortable, and sometimes ugly truths that so many other films shy away from. Compared to classics like The Breakfast Club or Mean Girls, which often lean into archetypes and stylized humor to explore teen identity and social groups, 13 takes a more unflinching and visceral approach. It doesn't frame its characters as caricatures or put their struggles in a neatly wrapped package. Instead, it immerses the audience in the confusion, desperation, and turbulence of early adolescence with a documentary-like realism. Where those other films might balance drama with levity or even hopefulness, 13 keeps its focus tight on the emotional chaos and consequences of choices, delivering a heavier, grittier experience that lingers longer. When you line it up against other films that tackle similar themes, like Kids or Gummo, *13* shares that raw edge and willingness to confront taboo subjects head-on, but it does so through a slightly more narrative-driven lens. Unlike those often fragmented or experimental films, 13 offers a clearer storyline and character arcs, making the emotional journey easier to follow while still refusing to pull punches. It balances the starkness of its themes with moments of genuine human connection and vulnerability that give the story heart. Looking at the director Catherine Hardwicke's broader filmography, 13 feels like a foundational work that showcases her talent for capturing youth in flux with authenticity and style. Hardwicke later went on to direct films like Lords of Dogtown and Twilight, where she maintained her focus on intense emotional experiences and subcultures, but 13 remains arguably her most personal and unfiltered work. It's where her knack for blending gritty realism with stylistic flourishes first really shines through. The handheld camera work, the intimate close-ups, and the jumpy editing style all contribute to a visceral sense of immediacy that Hardwicke would continue to refine in later projects. Compared to the typical Hollywood teen drama machine, 13 breaks the mold by refusing to romanticize or trivialize the darker sides of adolescence. It's less about coming out on top and more about surviving the chaos, which sets it apart from films that prioritize neat resolutions and feel-good endings. This film challenges viewers to grapple with uncomfortable emotions and messy realities, offering a fresh take on a familiar genre. It's also worth noting how 13 influenced later teen dramas and indie films. Its unvarnished portrayal of youth paved the way for movies and series that sought to depict teenagers with more nuance and less glamorization, showing the cracks beneath the surface rather than glossing over them. In that sense, it feels like a trailblazer, a touchstone for those wanting to explore adolescence beyond clichés. In short, 13 isn't just another teen drama. It's a standout for its brutal honesty, stylistic energy, and emotional depth. It may share the genre with countless films, but it refuses to play by the same rules, offering something raw, challenging, and ultimately unforgettable. 13 is loaded with symbolism and metaphors that work quietly beneath the surface, adding layers of meaning that turn the film into a richer, more textured experience every time you dig a little deeper. These visual cues and recurring motifs aren't shouted from the rooftops. Instead, they sneak in through subtle details and moments that make the story resonate on a psychological and emotional level beyond the straightforward plot. One of the strongest symbolic threads running through the film is the use of mirrors and reflections. Throughout 13, mirrors aren't just props. They're a visual shorthand for Tracy's fractured identity and the tension between how she sees herself and how the world sees her. Scenes where Tracy catches her reflection often coincide with moments of self-doubt, transformation, or crisis. Sometimes the reflection is clear and sharp, other times it's distorted or fragmented, symbolizing her fractured sense of self as she tries to piece together who she wants to be versus who she actually is. This recurring motif perfectly encapsulates the theme of adolescence as a time of constant self-examination and identity struggle. The film also plays with the motif of duality and contrasts, especially between Tracy and Evie. Their relationship itself is a living metaphor for the push and pull between innocence and corruption, conformity and rebellion, security and chaos. Visually, their differences are emphasized through costume and setting. Tracy's more subdued, restrained look and environment clash with Evie's edgy, flamboyant style and reckless world. This contrast extends beyond appearances and becomes a metaphor for the choices and influences that pull teenagers in different directions, highlighting the thin line between empowerment and self-destruction. Another subtle but powerful metaphor appears in the use of scars and wounds, not just physical but emotional. Tracy's self-harm is portrayed with unflinching realism, but it also serves as a metaphor for the internal pain and turmoil that's invisible to others. The act of cutting becomes a physical manifestation of psychological suffering, a silent scream for control or release. The film's lingering focus on these wounds draws attention to the hidden struggles beneath the surface and reinforces the theme of adolescent pain that's often misunderstood or ignored. Colors and lighting also contribute symbolic meaning throughout the film. The muted, sometimes cold tones of Tracy's home life contrast sharply with the brighter, more chaotic hues of her excursions with Evie. This visual difference mirrors Tracy's emotional journey from a safe but stifling environment into a more dangerous, unpredictable world. The shifts in lighting and color temperature underscore the tension between comfort and risk, innocence and experience. The motif of clothing and appearance itself is rich with symbolism. Tracy's gradual transformation, from frumpy kid to someone trying on new identities through clothes, makeup, and attitude, is more than just a surface change. It's a metaphor for the fluidity of identity during adolescence and the way external changes are often attempts to mask or control internal confusion. The film uses wardrobe as a visual shorthand for the stages of Tracy's emotional and psychological metamorphosis. Even the recurring settings hold metaphorical weight. The school, often shown as cold and impersonal, symbolizes the pressures and social hierarchies that shape teenage life. The streets and shopping districts, on the other hand, represent freedom but also danger, a wild territory where Tracy tests boundaries and risks falling apart. The film's editing style, with its quick cuts, jumpy handheld shots, and occasional blurring, also works as a metaphor for Tracy's mental state. The fragmented visuals mirror her emotional volatility and the disorienting rush of adolescent experience, pulling the viewer into her chaotic perspective. Taken together, these symbolic layers turn 13 into more than just a coming-of-age story. They transform it into a visual and emotional puzzle where every reflection, every scar, every shift in color holds a piece of the bigger picture about identity, pain, and the messy process of growing up. The film rewards viewers who look beyond the surface and invites repeated viewings to uncover all the quiet, powerful metaphors woven into its fabric. 13 isn't part of a franchise or series, which actually works in its favor because it stands alone as a sharp, singular snapshot of a very specific slice of adolescent life. It's like a time capsule capturing the early 2000s teen experience, and in that sense, it carries its own historical weight. The film's setting, style, and themes are deeply rooted in that era's cultural and social landscape, making it a fascinating look back at a moment when the internet was just starting to change how teens connect, rebel, and express themselves. Set in suburban Los Angeles, 13 immerses you in the cultural milieu of the early millennium. Think grunge hangovers blending with the rise of pop-punk and the early days of digital socializing. The film captures the fashion, music, and slang of the time with a level of authenticity that makes it feel like an unfiltered diary from the period. It's not trying to glamorize or idealize the era, but instead shows the rough edges and contradictions of growing up during a time when old-school rules were clashing with new technology and shifting social norms. Historically, the early 2000s were a period of increasing awareness around adolescent mental health, peer pressure, and the darker side of youth culture, and 13 dives right into these issues with a candidness that was still relatively rare in mainstream media back then. It captures that cultural moment when conversations about self-harm, family dysfunction, and teenage rebellion were starting to come out of the shadows but hadn't yet been fully normalized or understood. In this way, the film feels pioneering, laying groundwork for later movies and shows that would explore these topics more openly. The film's portrayal of family dynamics and social environments also echoes broader social trends of the time. The single-parent household, economic pressures, and suburban malaise all mirror real issues many families faced, making the film feel grounded in the lived realities of its audience. It doesn't idealize or romanticize suburban life but exposes its cracks and challenges, reflecting the shifting cultural attitudes towards family, adolescence, and authority during that period. Musically and stylistically, the film is a product of its time but manages to avoid feeling dated because its themes, identity struggles, peer influence, family conflict, are timeless. The soundtrack, filled with alternative and indie tracks popular in the early 2000s, anchors the film in its historical context and enhances the emotional texture without overpowering the narrative. It's a perfect sonic snapshot that complements the visuals and story. Unlike period pieces that aim to reconstruct distant history with elaborate costumes and sets, 13 feels immersive because it captures the contemporary moment of its release with immediacy and honesty. Watching it today offers a kind of cultural archaeology, an opportunity to see what life looked and felt like for a certain kind of teenager at that time, with all its confusion, rebellion, and fleeting moments of hope. So while 13 isn't tied to a franchise or a series, its historical context is a major part of its impact. It's a film very much of its time, yet it speaks across generations by portraying the raw and universal experience of growing up. It serves as a cultural artifact that's both a mirror and a window, reflecting the early 2000s teen scene while inviting us to consider how much and how little has changed since then. 13 was made on a relatively modest budget, especially compared to the big-budget teen flicks and Hollywood blockbusters of its time. The film's budget hovered around the low millions, which might sound small in the world of cinema, but what it lacked in financial muscle it more than made up for in raw, creative energy and authenticity. This lean budget actually worked to the film's advantage, pushing the filmmakers to focus on intimate storytelling, real locations, and naturalistic performances instead of expensive effects or flashy set pieces. The production quality of 13 punches well above its weight, proving that you don't need a massive budget to create something that feels vibrant and immersive. The film's gritty, handheld camera work, natural lighting, and minimalistic sets lend a documentary-like realism that perfectly suits the story. Instead of feeling cheap or rushed, the production design and cinematography come across as deliberate choices that enhance the film's raw emotional power. This resourceful use of budget creates a look and feel that's both immediate and timeless, making the most of what's available rather than trying to hide limitations. When it comes to box office performance, 13 didn't smash records or become a massive commercial blockbuster, but it carved out a respectable niche for itself. It performed solidly in the indie film circuit and among critics, gaining attention primarily for its bold storytelling and striking performances. Its earnings were modest compared to mainstream teen movies, but it found its audience through word of mouth and critical acclaim rather than blockbuster marketing campaigns. The film's success was more about cultural impact and critical respect than pure financial numbers. Marketing for 13 was relatively understated, reflecting its indie roots. It didn't have the massive promotional budgets or flashy trailers that pump up big studio releases. Instead, its buzz was built on festival screenings, critical praise, and a growing reputation as a groundbreaking teen drama. This more targeted marketing approach helped the film reach audiences who were hungry for something different from the typical teen fare. It became something of a cult favorite, especially among viewers who connected with its honest portrayal of adolescence. Audience reception played a big role in sustaining 13's life beyond its initial theatrical run. Viewers who saw it appreciated its unvarnished look at the struggles of growing up, and many became champions of the film, recommending it to friends and revisiting it themselves. This grassroots support helped the film maintain relevance, especially in home video and later streaming platforms, where it found a new generation of viewers. Interestingly, the modest budget and financial performance didn't limit the film's creative ambition or impact. If anything, the constraints helped the filmmakers focus on what mattered most, the emotional core of the story and the authenticity of the characters. It's a classic example of how indie filmmaking can turn budget limitations into artistic strengths. So, while 13 wasn't a box office juggernaut, its financial story is one of smart, effective use of resources and finding success on its own terms. It's a reminder that sometimes the best films aren't the ones with the biggest budgets or the loudest marketing, but those that connect deeply with their audience and tell their story with honesty and heart. If you want to dive into 13 and experience its raw, unfiltered glimpse into teenage life, you've got a few good options depending on how you like to watch your films. This movie originally hit theaters in the early 2000s, so catching it on the big screen back then meant immersing yourself in that tense, gritty atmosphere alongside other moviegoers, which definitely added to the intensity. These days, unless it's part of a special indie film screening or retro film festival, it's not a typical theatrical release, so streaming or digital rental is your best bet. Streaming platforms often have 13 in their indie or drama categories, so it's worth checking out services that focus on independent cinema or have deep movie libraries. If you have a subscription to one of the major streaming services, it's always worth searching there because availability can rotate, but if it's not currently included in your subscription, you'll often find it available for digital rental or purchase through platforms like Amazon Prime Video, iTunes, Google Play Movies, or Vudu. Renting or buying digitally means you can watch it anytime, pause and rewind to catch every subtle glance and line, and really soak in the intimate raw performances that make this film stand out. Watching 13 on a personal screen, like your TV or laptop, gives you a chance to lean into the small, intense moments that might get lost in a crowded theater. The film's handheld camera work and naturalistic style reward close attention, so a quiet environment where you can focus on Tracy's emotional journey without distractions is ideal. Dim the lights, turn off your phone, and prepare to be pulled into a world that's messy, raw, and absolutely gripping. If you're a collector or a fan of physical media, hunting down a DVD or Blu-ray copy can also be rewarding. Physical editions sometimes come with bonus features like director commentary, behind-the-scenes footage, or interviews with the cast, offering extra insight into the film's making and its cultural impact. This added context can deepen your appreciation of the film's artistry and the bold choices that set it apart. For those who like the communal experience of watching movies, keep an eye out for special screenings at indie cinemas or film festivals that celebrate cult classics and groundbreaking teen dramas. Seeing 13 projected on a big screen with an engaged audience can amplify the emotional punch and spark lively discussions afterward, reminding you why this film has endured as a cult favorite. No matter how you choose to watch 13, the key is to give yourself space to really connect with its story. It's not background noise or casual entertainment. It's an emotional ride that rewards viewers who dive in fully. So whether you stream it in your cozy living room, catch a special screening with fellow film lovers, or explore it with bonus features on DVD, 13 invites you to experience adolescence in all its raw, unfiltered complexity.